La diffusion vient de démarrer. Tous les participants sont en mode écoute seul.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the webinar on the Clean Bus from the Clean Bus Europe platform, and welcome to joining us. My name is Arno Kerkhoff from UITP, from the bus unit, and I have the pleasure of introducing you to this first webinar series about the introduction to clean bus technologies, which will be presented after me by Hans Bekkers, which I would like to shortly introduce to you. Next slide. So Hans Bekkers started at the VDL Bus Coach 5 years ago, 2014. He's currently the business development manager from the company, and has been responsible for VDL's first e-bus projects amongst the ones in Münster and Cologne. We have, as UITP, also the pleasure to have VDL as a UITP member company for many years, also member of the UITP Industry Committee. And Hans Bekkers personally is involved in one of the leading European projects called Assured, on which we will present some details later in the webinar. I would like to present you the agenda of this afternoon. We will have 1 hour together to run through the, let's say, different clean bus technologies. So we have designed this agenda with a short introduction first, to set the scene on where we are today in terms of clean bus development policy framework and the latest information we got from the European Commission in terms of mainly targets of cleaning up the bus fleet in Europe. So his introduction will be given by Hans. And after this short introduction, we will bring you to the overview per, let's say, clean bus technology, where we start with the electric battery buses, then go to the fuel cell buses, and then show the plug-in hybrid buses, and then the emotion charging trolley buses, and finally end the overview with the gas, be it CNG and LNG bus technology in Europe. So we will try to present those technologies in a fairly descriptive way, by also showing some of the main advantages and challenges for cities and operators wanting to deploy those technologies, and eventually also illustrate with some recent examples in European cities who adopted those technologies. And for the end, 10 minutes we keep for Q&A. So we would invite the participants to this webinar to either keep the questions to the end on your written notebook, but you can also type them in the webinar application. So there is a chat box with a hand. You can at any moment of time type the question. So we are here at the UITP main office with the colleagues moderating the webinar. We will collect those questions and share them in the end, so in the Q&A session. Maybe an important notice for those who are sensitive for, let's say, reuse of information. So this webinar will be recorded, and therefore, maybe just for you to know, if you do not want to figure in the recording, so then, of course, you will not be able to speak in the Q&A session. Otherwise, we would be delighted also to record your questions in the Q&A session and share that later for broadcast through the special website. Maybe before Hans giving the floor to you, I would like to stress the next slide more on the goal of today. As I mentioned before, it is to provide basically a complete overview of clean bus technologies also as we have consulted and collected from the UITP network in the recent times, we want to share with you from the Clean Vehicle Directive what is meant in this new directive around the concept of clean bus. What are the main features and main challenges of each technology? It will be shared for the 5 mentioned clean bus technologies already, and specifically the aspects important to take into account upfront when considering to buy or to start planning the respective new technologies in your company or in your city. As well, we try to compile as part of the webinar a list of sources of information to which you can refer to later offline to further learn on the explicit mentioned clean bus technologies, and so we could also give a forecast and a preview for the next webinars to come. But yeah, before being there, I think it's a good moment now to hand over to the main presenter of the webinar. Yeah, Hans, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Arno. I hope everybody hears me very well. Thank you for the nice introduction. We have quite a bit of ground to cover today, so we're going to do it relatively quickly. I can imagine that some of the topics will be a bit difficult, or if there are any questions, then just do so as Arno mentioned, and come back at it afterwards. First of all, one very important document for all of us is the Clean Vehicle Directive. So if you're active in public transport sector, then the Clean Vehicle Directive is applicable for you. It means for instance, for me, for somebody from an OEM, but also the guys who are working at a PTA or at the PTO will be confronted with the Clean Vehicle Directive. It's a European directive, so it's in place for all European member states, and it gives a good definition of what is expected of the different players, the different stakeholders in the market. First of all, the Clean Vehicle Directive defines what a clean bus should look like. It's either driven by electricity, hydrogen, or natural gas, which are the cleanest fuels, but also by most of the biofuels, synthetic fuels, or liquefied petroleum gas. And the definition in the Clean Vehicle Directive says that a zero emission bus, which is a tailpipe, is a bus with an internal combustion engine, without an internal combustion engine, or with an internal combustion engine that emits less than 1 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour, or less than 1 grams of CO2 per kilometer. If you want to know more about the directive, it's available online. You just look it up at its number, which is 2019-1161, and it will give you all the information. We're currently in the so-called transposition period. So the Clean Vehicle Directive has been come into force in last summer, in the summer of 2019. The transposition period, for those who don't know, is the period that's there to allow member states, so the individual countries, to translate the directive into national legislation. So it means that between the summer of 2019 and the summer of 2021, we will see different member states of the European Union introducing local legislation which takes care of the goals that are set out in the Clean Vehicle Directive. This is quite a challenge because, well, some of you who are in this webinar have already some experience with electrical buses, but just to give you a figure, last year 10% of the market, around 10% of the market was clean or zero emission. This year the number will be a bit higher, but it also says that 90% of the market is not according to the Clean Vehicle Directive. So we have quite some work to do. An exchange on expertise can help us, of course, to make sure that the transition is made fast and efficiently. That's one of the reasons why we are here today in the webinar. And the Clean Bus deployment is there to help you do the transition. So what does it exactly mean, the Clean Vehicle Directive? What numbers are requested? You can see that in this slide. So on the right, we see the orange one, no quota. The the orange, the lighter orange or yellow is low emission, which is the vehicles on 2 slides back. So you can think of LPG or CNG, LNG, or biofuels. And then there is also a quote for absolute zero emission buses, which means trolley buses, electric buses, or fuel cell buses. The numbers you see in this slide are applicable for most member states, most Western member states. The countries which are not in the list on the right do have a similar quota, but it will be a bit lower. The quotas are calculated based on gross product in the respective markets, or in other words, how evolved the market itself is. And you can see that there are 2 quotas. One is from the transposition period, which is, like I just mentioned, 2021, summer 2021 until the end of 2025. And then the second quota is from the period between the 1st of 2026 until 2030. So you can see that the goals are quite ambitious. In other words, in 10 years, we should have, in most Western European countries, at least 32.5% of zero emission buses. So, like I just mentioned, it's very important for you all to have forums and user groups to exchange data. And this is one of the reasons why the Clean Bus Deployment Initiative has been started. It's been launched in 2017, and the main goal of the initiative is to speed up the introduction of clean buses throughout Europe. There are a number of things that are being used to do so, which is a policy framework, but also a framework around financials and the funding of the transition into electrical buses. And the third thing, which today is a part of, is the exchange of best practices and knowledge. So the ambition of the Clean Bus Europe platform is to bring together the stakeholders who can intervene and who can exchange on electrical buses and the way to introduce them into the market. And it's also one of the ambitions to match supply and demand. So for instance, ourselves as a manufacturer are coming to you, or you're coming to us to exchange on electrical buses and the possibilities. And for instance, to answer the question, how fast can we do this transition? One thing I would like to point out is that if you're a member of the Clean Bus deployment, the European Commission expects you to sign the Clean Bus Declaration. It's an official way to show that you're a part of the initiative, and that you're also focused around the goals that are formalized in this declaration. The CBEP is introducing different policies. There's also the fact that these clean bus technologies are driving the market in a great way. So everybody who reads, let's say, the industry news sees that electrical buses and fuel cell buses are dominating the news nowadays. But like I just mentioned, the different cities, the PTAs, the PTOs, they have difficulties in implementing this technology in daily life because it's a new technology, and therefore it's very important that we exchange with one another and make sure that the market uptake is as cleanly and as fast as it can get. Within the clean bus deployment, there is a working method. You can see it in this slide. The basic of this slide is that there is a lot of exchange possible. So there are webinars, there are forums, workshops, there is the pairing between the manufacturers and the PTAs and the PTOs. There will be a new website, including a toolbox that can be used to get introduced to the topic and to get more information on financial and policies to get to the next stage in the transition of the electrical bus. Some of the activities are depicted in this slide. So you can see we're now in a webinar, which is the orange one, but there will also be opportunities to go on study tours to visit, for instance, host cities, to join and participate in marketplaces. and to go to local meetings with people in your vicinity, in your region, in your country, to exchange on the things that they are doing to implement the electrical buses or the zero emission buses, to put it correctly. So there are a lot of different opportunities to meet and to exchange. The second goal of the webinar today is to give you an overview of the different technologies. So we have a number of them lined up for you. The first one is battery electric. We will go into plug-in, fuel cell, natural gas, and in-motion charging / trolley buses. First, we have a short look at the market size and the market trends. So as you can see on the right, there is the projection of the European Commission, and you can see that in the next 10 years we will have quite a significant shift in the used propulsion forms of city buses, where in 2020 the majority, 50% almost, is still diesel. You can see that it's the ambition to reduce this to 7.5% in 2030. And I think we all understand that this is quite a big step. There are a few technologies which are already, like say, mainstreaming. Those are battery electrical bus, the plug-in hybrid, and the LNG and CNG buses. There are also some other technologies. IMC is more or less a modernization of a concept which is already known for a very long time, which is a trolley bus. IMC in motion charging, so it's charging of a trolley bus while it's underneath the catenary. It's an old technology with a new edition of the IMC, and therefore bringing it again into the market. The other upcoming one is of course fuel cell, technology that we hear a lot about also in passenger car industry, but is still in low numbers in the market. There are a few remarks that we can make on this slide as well. One of them is around plug-in hybrids. So what we see is that in a number of countries, plug-in hybrids are used as some kind of a transition technology. It means that you can do an easier step from a diesel fleet into an electrical fleet by having a hybrid driveline. And another remark that we can make is that the uptake of the CNG, LNG buses is different per market. So there are a number of markets, for instance, France and Spain, where CNG, LNG is very popular. Whilst if you look at, for instance, Germany or the northern countries, their gas is not that popular. Of course, there are a number of fleets, but the number is not that big. So the technology that is most likely for you to use in your operation can be different. It depends on local circumstances. So in this slide, which is I would say one of the more important ones in this presentation, in this webinar, you can see the different technologies that we just mentioned, compared to 5 different parameters. One is the reference in the CVD, in the Clean Vehicle Directive. Is it the zero emission, or is it seen as a clean solution? The second one is autonomy, where we have a battery and battery electric and plug-in hybrid, which have limited ranges because of battery size. Natural gas and fuel cell can be seen as comparable to diesel. Most of the time it's a little bit less, but let's call them comparable. And then the IMC trolley bus, which can be seen as limited, unlimited, it doesn't matter of how you look at it. But virtually by just keeping the bus passing lines where he has the catenary, he can charge in between, and he has a virtually limitless range. Same goes for battery electric. If you do it opportunity charging, you could do a limitless range. The next column is the charging and the refueling infrastructure. A lot of the alternatives to diesel also mean that the investment in infrastructure is quite high, especially for battery electric and fuel cell. These costs can be very high. Natural gas is scaled as moderate, sometimes high. It depends a little bit on the supply of natural gas that you have. IMC trolley bus is scaled as moderate. This is actually the trolley lines, the catenary lines are very expensive. But the addition of an IMC trolley bus doesn't mean that you need to have more catenary in your city. So one of the things that you could imagine is that you use the existing catenary, and therefore the extra infrastructure cost is moderate. And of course, plug-in hybrid is relatively low. You're still running on diesel. Most of the time they have a small charger in the depot, but because of the size of the charger, the investments are relatively low. Fourth column is the impact on operation. So this also has a lot to do with the range, which is in column 2. So the higher the range, the lower the impact. Especially with battery electric and fuel cell, you have relatively high impact on operation because you need to take into account the refueling and the recharging of the buses. And the last column is the impact on the urban landscape. So for instance, for trolley buses, you can imagine that the catenary gives a certain image of the city, which sometimes cities do or don't like. Same goes for battery electric. If you have opportunity charging, you most of the time have charges somewhere in your city which have a certain impact. Plug-in hybrid, natural gas, and fuel cell, there the fueling or recharging is done in the depot, so the impact on the urban landscape is very low. Then for those of you who want to have a better understanding where certain fuels can be used, this is quite a complex graph, but I think it shows a very good image on what you could do. So on the X scale, we have a yearly or a daily mileage. And on the Y scale, we have the kilometers a year. What you can see is that electric is more used in the lower yearly mileages. And once you go up, you get into the CNG energy buses, or you go into renewable fuels such as HVO. In the background, you can also see the different applications. So the coaches, they can be seen in the back, and for the higher mileages, coaches are more likely to go to the renewable fuels than to, for instance, electric, because of their usage, long distance travel. So a bit more on battery electric. We have different ways of doing battery electric. One of the ways is overnight charging. Here you have a fairly high battery capacity. The batteries that are used are normally a chemistry which is LFP or NMC, and they have a medium autonomy, which means between 200 and 250 kilometers. Most important thing to take away from the overnight charging is that because of the big battery, you're doing a trade-off between the battery size and the passenger capacity. So you can go up in battery capacity, or you can go up in range, but your trade-off is going to be that you are reducing your passenger capacity. And the other way around is also, of course, true. So if you want to increase your passengers, you're decreasing battery size, therefore having less range. Important thing to mention also is that some of the batteries in this this application can require a continuous charge when they are in the depot. Price indication of these buses is around 2 times the price of a overnight charging bus. The second way of doing battery electrical buses is with opportunity charging. One thing I want to make clear is most of the time people think about chargers at the end stops of the depot, of the line, but that doesn't always need to be true. So you can also do charges, for instance, in the depot itself, and charge at a convenient time. Shape your battery in such a size that you can do, for instance, the morning and the evening peak, and come back afterwards to do some recharging in the depot. Technologies that are used in this segment are predominantly NMC and LTO. LFP is also there, but only recently. And then the C rate of the battery, so how fast you can charge it, is lower than with NMC and LTO. Because of the fact that you can do the opportunity charging, the autonomy is reduced when you compare it to overnight. Most of the time it's less than 100 kilometers. There are basically 4 different charging strategies. The first one is flash charging. So this is very shortly. A good example of this is, for instance, the TOSA project in Geneva, or in Nantes in France. where they do very quick charging with around 600 kilowatts for a few seconds at a number of stops on the line. Opportunity charging I just explained. Most of the time it's at the terminus, but it can also be at other locations. It's charging at a given opportunity. Overnight charging is typically done in the depots with a combo CCS2 plug or with an automated connection device. And the fourth method is the one we see with the trolley buses, which is the in-motion charging. Like I mentioned before, doing the charging while the bus is under the catenary. Here you see a simple picture of the 4 different strategies. So in the depot, you can have, for instance, one charger charging multiple buses. Opportunity charging most of the times means a bottom-up or a top-down pantograph, or you can have a combination of the both, which I will show you in the next slides. If we go into automated connection devices, so most electrical buses standard have the Combo 2 plug, which is the same as in passenger cars. For high power charging, you're using the automated connection devices. The CCS, the one on the left, is the plug. And then you have either A or B if you have a roof mounted system. So the left one, the A1, is the inverted pantograph. On the right, we see the roof mounted pantograph. There are pros and cons for both, but more on that on a later webinar. And then the fourth picture you see, the one on the utmost right, is the system that is used by the Alstom buses, for instance. It's an automated connection device, which is on the bottom of the bus, floor mounted. If this is a specific interest of you, then I would like to refer to the Assure project, because all of these technologies are incorporated there, and there has been research how we can standardize these connections, make interoperability possible, and do upscaling to enlarge fleets in an economical way. Some of the examples, here we see the Combo 2 plug, some of the wall boxes that are on the pictures over here. In this case, we have 2 plugs in one bus, meaning that we can increase the power level with which the bus is charged. There are different solutions. This is just an example of it. You could also do plugless depot charging. So the picture on the right is the situation that's occurring in Eindhoven at the Transdev depot over there, where also the slow charging is done via the pantograph. The big advantage of this is that you don't need anything on the ground level, reducing damage by accidents and things like that, or overrunning the cables of the Combo 2 plug. The inverted plug over here in, inverted panto in Gothenburg. This is a project of Volvo, where it's also interesting to mention that the picture in the middle, you can see the inverted pantograph mounted inside of a building. So it's also one of the nice opportunities that you have with electrical buses, charging inside buildings, because there's no exhaust gas. Here we see the roof-mounted pantograph at TNB Barcelona. It's a Schunk model, so the connection is made by the pantograph coming up from the bus and hitting the contact hood, which is shown on the picture on the left, bottom left. And you can see that there are solutions like the picture before of Eindhoven, or here in Barcelona in the depot. And on the right, you see the solution that Barcelona has in the city, where there is a charging mast in the city streets. In Eindhoven, I already mentioned the project. There is a mixed charging strategy that is done to optimize TCO. Like I said before, this is also one of the examples. Battery size a little bit bigger, therefore the fleet is capable of doing the morning and the evening peak without doing intermediate charging. After the peak, the buses are getting back to the depot where the charging will be done, and the system is shaped in such a way that fast and slow charging can be done at similar locations, making it very easy for the drivers to go put their bus on charging location. Last example is the underfloor system, which is here at the Alstom bus in Malaga in Spain, where you can see that you have a connection plate in the street, and then on the pictures on the right you see the connection device, making sure that the connection is made. Next technology is fuel cell buses. Fuel cell buses are around for quite a bit of time. The technology has been there for a number of years, but in recent years we have seen that they have picked up in popularity. If you're interested in fuel cell buses, the best project to follow is the Jive, or Jive 2 is its successor project, and there you have a lot of different projects with hydrogen buses. The big benefit of hydrogen is that its energy density. So if you compare 1 kilogram of hydrogen with 1 kilogram of battery, the level of energy is much higher. If we compare it to diesel, then diesel is also a bit higher than hydrogen. But hydrogen itself is a very good way of transporting lots of energy in a small space or in a small weight. The good thing about hydrogen is that can be stored. So for instance, if we have wind farms or solar farms, the energy that is produced there can be stored into hydrogen and then can be used at a time and a location to the convenience of the user, which is a big benefit of hydrogen at the moment. If we compare it to its downside, then we can say that hydrogen has a lot of efficiency losses down the way. So if you start with, for instance, a full green energy like wind energy, and you bring the hydrogen into the vehicle, then you have approximately 50 to 60% of the original energy available, because you have to put electricity into hydrogen and hydrogen back into electricity again, which is not that efficient. On the right, you see a basic example of a fuel cell. So we see the PEM cell, which is there to do get the hydrogen formed into electric. PEM stands for proton exchange membrane. So that's what's being done in this membrane, is generating energy. The other two products which are being generated is water, of course, everybody knows, and also a little bit of heat, which is not that much, but there's some waste heat in this process. If we look at the fuel cell bus, and the title already gives it away a little bit, the basics of a fuel cell bus is also an electrical bus. So one of the things I always mention when I'm talking to customers about the different technologies is that it's not a match between fuel cells and electrical buses who's going to win, because it basically is the same technology. The only difference is, and this is putting it into layman's terms, of course, the only difference is that the electrical bus has its charger in the depot or in the street, and the hydrogen bus takes its charger along. And this PEM cell that I was just referring to is basically a charger. It's charging a battery which is in this fuel cell bus, and the rest of the driveline is identical to electrical buses. So there's not a big difference there, but you can imagine that once you have to add a fuel cell and the storage for hydrogen, there will always be a disadvantage for hydrogen when it comes to TCO, which can only be solved when you are in operations where you have, for instance, a bigger range to cover, or electricity is not available in the power levels that you would need to run on your operation. Some of the advantages and challenges of fuel cell buses. First of all, the operating range is one of the big benefits of hydrogen. So you can go up to 450 kilometers. It's also very easy and fast to recharge or refuel the bus, however you want to put it. In around 10 minutes, you can fill up the storage system. Because the basics of the bus are an electrical bus, you can do energy recuperation during deceleration and braking. On the downside, there are high upfront costs because of the infrastructure and like I just mentioned, the fact that you have an electrical bus added with an added fuel cell and hydrogen storage. You need to have hydrogen close to you. And if you do not, then you need to transport hydrogen, and this is an added cost to the cost of ownership. And the hydrogen fueling stations are still quite expensive because of the high pressures that need to be obtained to compress the hydrogen into a workable fluid. So here we see some pictures of the refueling infrastructure. On the left, we see the unit which is at the line in Belgium. You also have to store the hydrogen, so that's also something that has to be taken into account. Your workshop has to be compliant to the use of hydrogen, so you have certain safety measures that have to be taken into account when designing your workshop. And then you need to determine if you want to get your hydrogen from a local supplier or a supplier which is a bit further down in your region, or if you want to produce it on the spot, which can also be done by electrolyzers. So these are choices that have to be made when looking into to hydrogen. But it certainly is a technology that's very interesting and good to watch, because once it will be introduced into heavy-duty traffic or passenger cars, we expect the prices of these units to come down, and hydrogen buses to become more competing with battery electrical buses. Some examples. This one is the RVK, which is the regional transporter in Cologne. It's the biggest fleet in Europe at this moment. 2 buses have been in operation for a longer time. 2 have been in operation but have been taken out, so 2 are running at this moment. I heard recently from the guys from RVK that the next batch of buses, which is the 45 that's mentioned on this slide, is now being delivered. 30 of them are ordered by them, and 10 are going to Wuppertal, which is a company very close. One of the biggest benefits of this project is that they have local hydrogen, which makes it very interesting for them to run on this fuel. And they are deploying it in a larger scale, and it's certainly one of the projects to watch on a European level. Other projects are, for instance, in Bolzano, where they also have a number of buses already in operation since the Chic project, which is also a European project. They have more buses planned under Jive. The first order is already there, and it will be delivered by Solaris. In UK, in London, we will see the first fuel cell double-deckers next year in 2020, where they will have a number of buses running in the London city traffic. In Groningen, in the Netherlands, it's also a result of the High Flow City project. We have 2 buses, and there are 20 more planned coming under Jive 2. And in France, the project in Pau, where they have 8 hydrogen Van Hool buses, BRT line, also a very interesting project to watch, also underneath the Jive 2 project on a European level. And this slide, just very shortly to show you that hydrogen has been around for quite some time already. The first buses we see here are already from 2008. There were a number of buses at BVG, which is the operator in Berlin. We had the High Move project in the Netherlands. There were a number of buses from Van Hool in Belgium. And also at the RET, which is Rotterdam in the Netherlands, they had 2 Van Hool buses running on hydrogen. And a number of you might remember the Evo bus projects at different locations in Europe. One of them was in Hamburg at Hamburger Hochbahn in 2011. Next technology is plug-in hybrid. Here we see the example of Volvo. So a hybrid bus is basically a bus with 2 or more power sources in the drivetrain. So it can be diesel, it can be CNG, LPG, also can be a fuel cell, basically, because it can be more than one power source. 9 times out of 10, it's combined with an electrical drivetrain. So the combustion engine or the fuel cell can be used in 2 different ways. First is you can use it to drive the bus itself. So then you have what we call a parallel hybrid, or you can do the charging of the batteries, and then we call it a serial hybrid. Because the internal combustion engine and the electrical motor are in series with each other to generate the energy that is used in these buses. The big benefit of a serial hybrid is that you can put the internal combustion engine in its optimal RPM and its optimal power level, and therefore have a very efficient drive line. It's well known in the market that the reduction in fuel consumption is 25 to 30% when you compare it to a similar diesel bus. Why plug-in? Plug-in means that we can charge the battery in the hybrid bus by using a charger. Big benefit of that is that we can use energy that's available in the electricity grid, being more efficient and even reducing exhaust gas emission even further. The principle that is used for this charging is similar to what we saw with the battery electrical buses. So you have both overnight charging as well as opportunity charging examples in this technology. One of the reasons to choose for plug-in hybrids is that they have a reduced impact on the urban environment, and they allow you to do things like, for instance, geofencing. So you could use the diesel engine to do big stretches of your line. And once you come into, for instance, the city center, you can use geofencing to instigate the electrical drive mode, meaning that the vehicle will not emit any exhaust gases in the city center or in other areas where you don't want the vehicles to pollute. This is a very interesting technology because it's not as expensive as the true zero emission technology, but still you can reach very good exhaust gas reductions in the locations where you want to, such as schools and near hospitals. The fifth technology that we have in this webinar is IMC. So like I mentioned in the beginning of the webinar, the basic of this technology is the well-known trolley buses. So there are a number of projects throughout Europe. Most countries they're not that common, but for instance in Switzerland, in Italy, and in Austria, you see quite a number of trolley bus systems. The difference between the classical trolley bus system and the IMC trolley bus, or the trolley 2.0, like a lot of people are calling it in the market, is that you can do charging while underneath the catenary. There's a battery in the bus which is being charged. So a part of the energy coming via the trolley poles is used for the driveline. The surplus is used to charge the battery. And with this technology, you allow yourself to go into places where there's no catenary. So the amount of catenary in a project like this can be different. You can go as low as 20%. Which means that you can do a lot of driving outside the catenary network, but you can also do something like 80, which then allows you again to reduce the battery size and have more passengers in the vehicle. So there again, you have the similar trade-off that we saw with the battery electrical buses, and it allows the operator to choose the solution which fits best to his operation. Like I mentioned in the slide with the big table on it, it gives you a virtually unlimited autonomy, because if you do the planning carefully, you can make sure that the bus goes back to the catenary when he needs to, can recharge, and can go back into the suburbs where he can pick up the people along the line. Some of the advantages and challenges of this technology. The 20 to 40% of the route I just mentioned. It's in motion charging, so this is virtually the only way where you can have a full zero emission driveline and do not have to stop for charging. The counterpart is the plug-in hybrid, where you can do something similar, but you will have to use the internal combustion engine sooner or later. Because you don't have to stop, you don't need any extra vehicles or drivers. You can reduce battery capacity if you're in the position to have more catenary on your lines. And there are a lot of synergies with the other PT modes, especially light rail products such as tram and metro. Because trolley buses use the same power supply, you can extend existing tram and metro lines into trolley lines and make it easier to adopt this technology into your city. Big downside of this technology is, of course, the fact that there are catenary lines throughout the city, making it not as nice as when you don't have any. But of course, this is a subjective position. Some examples of these IMC projects. One of them is the Cagliari project in Italy, where they were a participant of the Zeus project, which I'll come back to later. These buses have been running on two different lines, or one line with two different configurations, one in the summer, one in the winter. You can see that A big part of the line is equipped with the catenary line. It's green pieces we see over here. But by using a large enough battery, they were capable of doing one part of the route in the winter and two parts of the route in the summer with full electric, giving it the opportunity to extend the line without extending the catenary. Last technology that we have to discuss in this webinar is natural gas, where we have two different technologies in this domain. First of all, the compressed natural gas. The second is the liquefied natural gas. There are different approaches by different OEMs, so a number of opportunities are available. CNG is relatively simple to make. You only need to have an installation that can do the high pressure conditions to manufacture it. LNG is a bit more complex, but because of the cooling, you can get the gas into a liquefied state, making it easier to transport. So there are benefits and downsides to both of them. But the big benefit of both technology is that this is an available technology and that there are a number of OEMs who have this technology already available. It's basically an internal combustion engine which shows a lot of similarities with the diesel engine. So the technology is a bit different than diesel motors, but it gives you quite a good reduction in CO2 emissions. With this very similar technology that is known to technical people in the workshop today. Main features of this technology is that the well-to-wheel reduction of CO2 is, even if you compare it to the EU mix, is there. You have economies of scale for the construction of the infrastructure. So especially if you do bigger fleets, you will see that the cost you need to put into infrastructure can be reduced if you compare it on a vehicle-to-vehicle level. Because of the capacity of the tanks, you will be able to do refueling only once in every 2 or 3 days, which is again good for your TCO. Like I mentioned before, if you have to do routes which have cover longer distances, you go in and out suburban and metropolitan areas, you have a big benefit with this technology just because of the fact that the autonomy of the CNG and LNG buses is a lot better than the zero emissions such as battery electrical buses. One of the examples in this domain is the project in Sofia, where they have around 280 CNG buses on a total of 650. So they are doing a fleet renewal there. You can see the steps that they are taking are quite drastic, and reducing their CO2 and exhaust gas emissions quite quickly. Here there are some snapshots from what they achieved. So they see a similar fuel consumption with the CNG buses when compared to a diesel bus, which is around 50 liters or 60 kilograms per 100 kilometer. They have a very good price for the natural gas, which is 60% lower than diesel. And because of the annual mileage of 60,000 kilometers, they save around 50,000 euros per year. And the result of this is that they had a return on investment of only 1 year of operation, which is extremely fast. This is just one example, so it can be different in your operation. But if you have production of, for instance, CNG close, it can be a good alternative. Having that said, one thing I have to remark, of course, is that CNG and LNG is not 100% zero emission, but still within the Clean Vehicle Directive, it's allowed to use as one of the alternatives. So it can be very interesting to have a look into. Another example is, of course, EMT in Madrid in Spain. They have one of the largest fleets of CNG buses. Here we see some pictures of their depot with fueling stations at a number of bays. They have a fleet of around 1,500 CNG buses. Like I said, I think it's one of the biggest fleets in Europe on CNG. Also interesting to see is that EMT is also now looking into battery electrical buses to even reduce their emissions of their fleet even more. Here we see another example of also EMT in San Gennaro, where they use an overhead structure to fill up the buses individually. So you have the example on this slide where you have a fueling station per bay. Here we have one central fueling station with outlets per bus. Teper in Bologna, the last slide for me, is also an example. So those of you who are following the news must have seen that last week, or actually this week, Scania has delivered their first LNG bus to Bologna. This is one of 15 buses that have been ordered by Teper. They have a number of these buses running. Italy is also, I would say, one of the leading one of the leading countries when it comes to LNG, as they have 56 of the 200 LNG refueling stations throughout Europe. So it's one quarter of all the fueling stations is in Italy, which I think shows very well the potential of the Italian market. One of the big benefits of LNG is, of course, the reduction of the CO2 emissions with around 20%. And there's almost no nitrogen oxide or particulate emissions. Same remark as I made a few slides back. It can be a very good alternative if you have the facilities close by. Not 100% zero emission, but according to the Clean Vehicle Directive, it's still allowed to use a technology like this, and especially in regional operations, I think it could be a very good alternative. Arno, I think it's up to you again.
Absolutely, Hans, and thank you for the, I would say, extensive overview of the technologies. We know it's not easy to condensate everything in a couple of slides, and I'm sure after I think 1 or 2 slides I will present now, we have some questions coming from the participants. Yeah, I take this time now just also to highlight the different research and innovation projects around clean and electric buses, in which the UITP is involved either as a coordinator or as a partner. There is the Assured project, which is looking to the high capacity buses, high capacity electric buses for opportunity charging. And each time I would say, if there is specific interest amongst the participants in this webinar to get more information about the project, please flag this interest to UITP so that we can bring you in connection with the right person who is in charge of managing the project in UITP. Then we have the project of Zeus. This is an already finished project, but the main project deliverables are available for the public. And there's quite a lot of information in that I can tell you. The same goes for EBSF2, so European Bus Systems of the Future, Part 2. This project is finished, looking to different energy optimization aspects for electric buses, where also deliverables can be shared with the participants today. Well, Clean Bus Europe platform, that's where we're in today. Elliptic is another project, also finished, more looking at the synergies between public transport networks, be it tram or trolleybus, and the synergies with the electric bus developments. Then we have the projects on hydrogen called Jive and Jive2, where we are as UITP managing the user group. And last but not least, the Trolley 2.0 project, which is looking to the applications of the in-motion charging for trolley buses. For all those projects, we have the persons and also the deliverables available at UITP. Then the next slide, very short for the upcoming websites. We would like to share with you after this webinar a survey, first of all, to ask your company, to ask your city where you are today in the decision-making process of cleaning up the bus fleet, if you're already thinking on a particular technology, and to share that with us so that we can also calibrate the thematics and the subject of the next webinar. For the upcoming website, this is something that will be operational early 2020. It's the website from the Clean Bus Europe platform, so where we will mainly continue to interact with you and with the different cities. With part of the portal, let's say, including the introduction of I would say information and profile data of the different European cities. We will also have a specific section on the website on information monitoring for the tenders on the European market. So maybe specifically interesting for you if you want to know what's happening in your country or in your neighboring country in terms of clean bus tenders. So we will also monitor the orders of the buses and the degree of deployment in the different member states. Evolution of the Apollo cities performance. So these are the cities that signed up with the letter, where it will specifically take a look how in those cities the deployment is making progress. And we will also make an effort to share on the website some very baseline informations on the national public transport fleets in the respective countries, and what is the share of clean buses in each of those bus fleets. Webinars, I already spoke about it quickly. So we will share with you a survey after this webinar to collect your let's say information on the state of I would say thinking and planning for specific clean bus technologies, and also to grasp at what stage you are in your country, in your city, with respect to clean bus deployment. So we would like them to dedicate the next webinar series to a chosen topic that covers most of the interest expressed, and then we will continue after that series with one on more, I would say, general aspects on each of the today mentioned clean bus technologies. Looking from the different angles, from planning to implementation, operation, and maintenance. So we are working on that right now, and we will continue in 2020 with more webinars, and most likely they will specifically dedicated to more transversal topics like the procurement or let's say the specific technological developments going on in the market, as well as the infrastructure requirements and social aspects. So we are planning quite a lot of those webinars. Next slide, maybe Hans. Here you see the different references that you can also consult after the website webinar today, where we have worked with to compose the current webinar. Thank you very much. There's still some time left. It's as always, it's difficult to completely manage the timetable, but we would like nonetheless to take 5-10 minutes of your time to share the questions. Eventually I will also ask Sunita to open the microphones for the speakers who might want to address any specific question right now. But before that, I would like to maybe take out one more general comments we got from different participants on the presentations availability. So this, of course, was mentioned in the beginning. The presentation, both the PowerPoint but also the recording, will be shared with you as a participant of the webinar shortly, as well as they will be posted on the website that will be online next year. One question we received from Rotterdam, and I would like to come back to that. I think it's important, Hans, when you showed the overview table quite in the beginning of the different technologies at a glance, we tried to position each clean technology against a certain number of aspects, including the operational performances, or let's say the impact of operations. So the question was that for fuel cell buses, the impact ranking was put as high on our table, and the question was what was the reason to put that as high, and shouldn't that be more moderate? So maybe we could start up from this question to see how we can address this right now. Hans, if you want to comment on that, or
Sure.
to give it back to UITP. Yes, please.
Yeah, I think what I would like to start off with is that this is, of course, a subjective table, and I would recommend everybody who is in the process of determining which technology is the most viable for their operation to draw up a table like this for themselves, because there are differences throughout the different countries and the different regions. The reason that fuel cells, the impact on the operation is put on high is because of the remarks I made of the fact that you need a fueling station you could need a fueling station in your depot, which has a certain safety aspects and permits and things like that have to be taken into account. You have to have people who are qualified to do the refueling, and the same goes for hydrogen buses. If we look at, for instance, the workshop, so the workshop needs to be equipped to be capable of working with dangerous gases like with hydrogen. The people that you need in your team need to be trained on this aspect of specific technology. The remark you could make is that that's also the case for the other technologies, which is true. But I'm coming back to my remark made on the basics of a hydrogen bus, where you have basically two technologies, being a battery electrical bus and the fuel cell technology in one product. So also your workshop team needs to be capable of dealing with the different different components that are in the bus, as well as having more components on stock to repair these buses. So that's why we put impact on operation for fuel cell buses on high. But like I said in the beginning of my answer, I think you should have a look for yourself. Maybe you have a team which is already very good qualified, and your building is already suitable to convert to a building suited for fuel cell buses, and the impact in your case can be lower. But that's the main reason why we put it on high in our table.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Hans. I think maybe complementary from UITP perspective, I can share that as UITP is coordinating the user group from Jive 2, that we will organize in March a let's say fuel cell buses let's say meeting and also training in Groningen in the Netherlands on invitation by Qbus and OV-bureau Drenthe Groningen. So there will be one day training where we will also present from the perspective of planning, operations and maintenance. I think the first consolidated feedback from bus operators. So I could maybe also specifically stress this for the people from the RET or other interested cities, that you can please let us know, UITP, if you are interested to participate to this training, which is taking place in the framework of Jive 2. Maybe one other question before opening the floor that we get from different participants was on the scope of the directive. It's true that we did not specifically focus too much technically into the directive, but nevertheless the question came back to ask to us whether the hybrid buses, I would say more the regular hybrid buses, were considered or not considered as clean buses. And the motivation of this question was mainly to stress that some cities start already having invested in last years in this technology, which we know reduced the emissions to a certain level, and that it would be strange that those buses are not considered as clean. I know that the same question was addressed also for electric buses using the famous diesel heater, and also the question comes back for the trolley buses using diesel auxiliary propulsion. So for those specific cases, what we have collected so far from UITP side is that on the regular hybrid buses, I mean, the directive is fairly silent. I mean, it is not mentioned specifically as alternative. There are some links in the directive to the DAFI, so the Directive of Alternative Fuels. So we investigated that a bit more with our European team, but up to date we did not come to a very clear, let's say, meaning from this directive. So for us, we consider the hybrid buses as being out of the scope of the directive. So that means that they are considered as like regular Euro 6 diesel buses. And I would say until further clarification, maybe also the transposition in the different national legislatives will show us what will happen in different markets with this specific case. On the other hand, the electric buses that are being operated with fuel heater are in the context of the Clean Vehicle Directive still considered as zero emission buses. So this might sound strange, but is considered as not a propulsion system, but as an auxiliary heating system. For the scope of the directive, these are still zero emission buses. Whereas on the contrary, for trolley buses that are being registered with still diesel auxiliary engines, in that case, they will be counted as clean vehicle and not as a zero emission vehicle. So this is maybe some more clarification that I can bring in terms of the scope of the directive. Okay, I'm looking here at the moderation team in Brussels. If something more was received. No. Maybe if there's any more question left, or let's say question raising right now in the attendance, please open your microphone, and we can still catch one or two questions before closing the webinar. So you should find a button on your screen for the GoToWebinar with the unmute function. So those who want to use it can now open the microphone. Or alternatively, click on the raise hand. There's a button with a small hand, so you can flag. Okay, good. It looks like we can close the roundtable at this moment of time, and therewith also come to the end to this first series of the webinar. From the UITP perspective, operating the Clean Bus Europe platform for the European Commission, we would like to thank you warmly, Hans, to have accepted to present the overview of the technologies. Thank you very much for
You're welcome.
For your time and for your effort. Appreciate it. And also the attendees of today's webinar, thanks a lot for being with us. And I would say, please, stay connected with the Clean Bus Europe platform. And as mentioned, we will soon reach out to you with our survey and also share the presentation and the recording with you as soon as possible. Thank you very much.